Soviet Union, 1970s. A superpower that treated information like a weapon. Locked down, censored, and completely controlled.
Decades later, a boy born in that system built the machine that made all information free.
Flash forward to January 2017. That young immigrant is no longer just a face in the crowd. He is now one of the wealthiest individuals on earth.
And there he is, spotted in a San Francisco airport arrival halls, standing shoulder to shoulder with protesters.
He is wearing casual clothes, no business attire, no security detail, no PR person in sight.
A reporter spots him and asks the obvious question, "Why are you here?"
He looks at them and says, "I'm here because I'm a refugee."
That man is Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, born in Moscow, left at 6, built the Google search bar that gives the entire world free access to all of its information.
Every answer you have ever searched for at midnight, every rabbit hole you have ever fallen into, it starts here.
In this episode, we are going to take you inside the exam rooms at Moscow State University, the ones where Jewish applicants were separated from everyone else. They had a cruel name for those rooms. When you hear it, you will understand everything about the world Sergey Brin's family was running from.
We'll tell you about a $100,000 check written out to a company that didn't even exist yet. No incorporation papers, no bank account, nowhere to put that money. It sat in a desk drawer for weeks. That check is now the founding investment for a company worth over $2 trillion.
And we'll tell you about the day Sergey Brin looked up a single marker in his own genetic data and discovered he might be carrying the same disease that was already taking his mother. What he did next, no philanthropist in recorded history has done before.
I'm Harsh.
And I'm Vaishali. And this is the Victory Code Podcast.
A show about immigrants, their journey, their failures, their successes, and everything in between. Every episode, we go deep into one extraordinary immigrant life and hand you their mindset, their turning points, and their hard-won strategies, things you can actually use.
Not inspiration, systems. Not motivation, codes.
Before we get to Google, before we get to the garage, before we get to the billions,
there is a mathematician and a researcher living in a 3-room Moscow apartment with their young son and a grandmother in the 1970s. That apartment is where Google's soul was made, long before its code was ever written.
Because that young son was Sergey Brin. He came from a country that had decided, officially, that minds of a certain race were a security risk. That decision is the reason Google exists the way it exists. Free, open, available to everyone.
His father, Michael Brin, was a mathematician, the kind for whom numbers are not a profession. They are a worldview. Everything reducible, everything solvable, everything eventually knowable.
His mother, Eugenia, was a researcher, equally brilliant, also a graduate of Moscow State University.
Two of the sharpest minds of their generation in the same apartment, in the same country, hitting the same ceiling over and over again, for the same reason.
In the Soviet Union of the 1970s, every citizen carried an internal passport. It had 5 lines: name, date of birth, place of birth, registered address, and then the 5th line, nationalnost.
Nationality, which in Soviet usage didn't mean where you were from. It meant your ethnicity, categorized by the state, stamped in Cyrillic on your document. Permanent.
If you were Jewish, line 5 said Yevrey, Jew. In 1973, the year Sergey Brin was born, the Soviet Union had an estimated 2.1 million Jewish citizens.
And that single word followed you into every room you ever tried to enter. Every university, every department, every door that mattered. It was there before you were, and it made the decision before you could.
Michael Brin, Sergey's father, wanted to be an astronomer. He had the mind and the hunger for it. And on paper, the Soviet scientific establishment needed him.
Officially, there was no anti-Semitism in the USSR. Officially. In practice, and this is documented, Communist Party heads barred Jews from the physics department at major universities.
Because physics led to rockets. Rockets led to nuclear weapons. And the Soviet leadership did not trust Jews with nuclear weapons.
So Michael buried his dream of astronomy and focused on mathematics. He applied to the mathematics department of Moscow State University, one of the most prestigious mathematics faculties anywhere in the world. And there, he walked into a trap.
Jewish applicants to the mathematics department were separated from everyone else and put into different exam rooms. These rooms had a name.
Students and faculty called them the gas chambers.
Because apparently, herding Jewish children into a separate room to fail them on purpose needed a name. And that is the name someone chose.
The questions inside those rooms were not ordinary entrance exam questions. They were problems pulled from International Olympiad finals, the most elite mathematics competition in the world, where countries send their single best student.
Problems that the top mathematical minds, after weeks of preparation, would still struggle to crack. These were being handed to Jewish teenagers in an exam room with the clock running.
Because the point of those rooms was never to test whether you were good enough. The point was to make sure you failed.
But Michael Brin didn't just survive those exams. He demolished them. Straight A's. A mind like that in a fair world would have been calculating the trajectories of stars. He could have reshaped Soviet science.
He could have been the kind of mathematician countries name institutions after. But line 5 on his passport outranked every single one of those straight A's.
And it didn't just stop there. Even with those grades, when he went looking for graduate school, everywhere the answer was no.
He couldn't even have a Jewish doctoral advisor because Jews were not allowed Jewish advisors. He eventually defended his PhD at a university in Kharkiv, Ukraine, the only institution in the entire country willing to consider his thesis.
His wife Eugenia was also a mathematician, a Moscow State University graduate, a woman built for research. The Soviet state put her in the Oil and Gas Institute, doing work that had nothing to do with what her mind was capable of.
America later put her at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. That contrast alone tells you everything you need to know about what the Soviet Union wasted, all because of line 5.
Michael Brin ended up at Gosplan, the Soviet State Planning Committee, a grey building, a government desk, a PhD in mathematics, spent counting the Soviet Union's grain outputs and 5-year economic plans.
The man could solve problems that stumped the world's greatest mathematical minds. They gave him a spreadsheet.
Years later, his son Sergey Brin built a world where no state, no system, no fifth line on any passport could ever decide what you were allowed to know.
After his PhD, after all of that, the Soviet state rewarded Michael Brin with a 100-ruble raise. In the late 1970s, that was roughly $100.
And Michael Brin said, and I quote, "I thought I was rich. Life was beautiful."
I love that line so much. The dry wit, the refusal to perform bitterness. That is the original Brin voice. And you will hear it again in his son, almost word for word.
I came here to the US at age 6 with my family from the Soviet Union, which was at that time, the greatest enemy the US had. Maybe it still is in some form. It was a dire period of the Cold War, and some of you probably remember it, and it was under threat of nuclear annihilation. And yet, even then, the US had the courage to take me and my family in as refugees.
Sergey said that standing in front of 2,000 of his own employees in the California sun, nearly 40 years after he first landed on American soil. He's talking about being 6 years old and what it felt like when a country decided he was worth letting in.
But that moment, him standing there free and wealthy and grateful, that moment almost didn't happen. Because before the arrival, there was the escape. And the escape nearly didn't come.
It's 1977. Michael Brin travels to Warsaw for a maths conference. It's one of the first times in years he has been allowed outside the Soviet Union.
For the first time in years, nobody looked at him with distrust.
Michael Brin walks on streets that are not in Moscow. He sits across conference tables from mathematicians from other countries, treated as peers, not suspects. He breathes air that doesn't carry that particular Soviet weight.
He comes home and he can no longer unsee what he has seen. He sits his family down and he says, it is time to leave.
His mother, Sergey's grandmother, doesn't want to go. She was in her 60s and had lived in Moscow her whole life.
Eugenia, Sergey's mother, is reluctant too. They have friends, a home, a life that works, and she loves that life.
For Eugenia, the decision ultimately came down to one thing. For her, it was 80-20. 80% about Sergey, 20% about everything else. She gives up her whole world so her son could discover his.
September 1978, Michael Brin files for an exit visa. He was fired the same week without warning.
Eugenia lost her job too. 2 incomes gone overnight. According to Stephen Levy's account in Duplex, the most detailed biography of Google's founding, from that day, the family was under KGB surveillance.
For the next 8 months, without any steady income, they scraped together whatever work they could find. Michael taught himself computer programming from scratch. He took on technical translation work, converting scientific and engineering documents from one language to another. Whatever anyone would pay him for that week, he did it.
And every week, they waited, afraid the visa would come back denied. Because for thousands of Jewish families, it did come back denied. They were called refugees, the people the Soviet states simply refused to release. Some waited years, some never got out, some just died waiting.
In May 1979, 8 months after they applied, the exit visa finally came through and they left.
They went to Vienna first. HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, was there waiting for them. They gave them a bed and pointed them in the right direction.
And then Paris. Michael's old academic mentor Anatole Katok had made the same journey the year before. He got Michael a temporary research position, wrote recommendation letters, made the calls, and slowly a path to America opened up.
Let me tell you how close they came to not making it out. In 1979, 51,000 Soviet Jews were granted exit visas. The Brins were among them. By 1981, just 2 years later, that number had collapsed to under 10,000. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan had slammed the window shut.
If Michael had come home from Warsaw in 1977 and said, "Not yet," that window would have closed. Which brings us to the first victory code. The risk you don't take is still a risk.
Think about what Michael Brin was actually considering. He had just come back from Warsaw. He realized what it was like to exist without suspicion. And now he was sitting in that Moscow apartment doing the hardest calculation of his life.
The risk of leaving was right in front of him. The apartment they had built their life in, the city Eugenia loved, his mother in her 60s being asked to leave everything familiar, 8 months of no income, a visa that might never come.
And then he looked at the risk of staying. His son, at 17, sitting in a gas chamber exam room, answering questions designed to make him fail, and then spending the rest of his life at a government desk doing work 12 sizes too small for him. The way his father had, the way his father's father had.
Michael weighed both risks and only one of them was acceptable. He did the calculations and he left.
If you want to go deeper into this world, there is a book called Refugee by Mark Asbel. Asbel was a Soviet Jewish physicist who lived what the Brin family lived: the gas chamber exam rooms, the closed doors, the visa application, the wait. He wrote it from the inside before he emigrated. It is not a history book, it is a first-hand account.
Summer 1990. Soviet Union is crumbling. Sergey Brin is almost 17. He hasn't been back since he left at 6.
His father Michael is leading a group of gifted American high school math students on a 2-week exchange trip to the Soviet Union. He brings the family along.
It doesn't take Sergey long to understand what he's seeing. The grey concrete, the cracked wall, the faces of people who have stopped expecting anything to change. He can see with absolute clarity the life that would have been his if his father had not filed that exit visa in 1978.
On the second day of the trip, while the group is touring a sanitarium outside Moscow, Sergey pulls his father aside.
And he says, "Thank you for taking us all out of Russia."
In October 2000, Sergey Brin sat down for an Academy of Achievement interview. He is 27 years old. Google is just 2 years old. And when asked about growing up in the Soviet Union and coming to America, the following clip is what he said. You can watch the full interview on YouTube.
I don't know, I feel like I've gotten a gift by being in the States rather than growing up in Russia. And I know the hard times that my parents went through there, and I'm very thankful that I was brought to the States.
A gift. That is how Sergey Brin describes being allowed into America. And he knows exactly who paid for it.
October 25th, 1979. Kennedy Airport, New York. The Brin family has just landed in America. Friends from Moscow who emigrated earlier are waiting for them there. They pile into a car and drive out onto the American highway.
Sergey Brin's first memory of the United States is sitting in the back seat of that car, watching the American highway roll out in front of him.
And he is stunned by how big the cars are.
They settle in Maryland, a modest house in a lower middle class neighborhood. The family takes a $2,000 loan from the local Jewish community to buy a used 1973 Ford Maverick, their first car in America.
Sergey's grandmother was in her 60s and had never lived anywhere else other than Moscow. And then she came to America and took the American driving license exam in English, a language she was still learning, just so she could take her grandson to school.
Sergey's first school is a Hebrew school where he is bullied for his thick Russian accent. He begs his parents to move him, and they do, to Paint Branch Montessori in Adelphi, Maryland. And there, the school's director Patty Barshay describes him as outgoing, self-confident, and fascinated by numbers and math. She also notes he gets bored because the math is too simple for him.
At home, Michael makes sure it isn't simple. He sits Sergey down after school and gives him math problems that go well beyond anything the classroom is teaching.
At age 9, Sergey Brin's father gives him a Commodore 64, one of the first personal home computers ever made, a machine the size of a keyboard that you plugged into your television. In 1982, that was the most advanced piece of technology a 9-year-old could get his hands on. Sergey writes his first program on it.
By the time he gets to Eleanor Roosevelt High School, he is in the math club, competing in coding competitions and taking university-level courses at Maryland on the side. He's not a quiet, studious kid sitting in the corner. He is curious, restless, and too quick for every room he is in.
While Sergey is finding his footing, his parents are finding theirs. His father, Michael Brin, is now a professor of mathematics at the University of Maryland.
And his mother, Eugenia, becomes a research scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. NASA, the American Space Agency, the Soviet Union's greatest rival in the space race.
The country they were told was their enemy looked at both of them and saw what the Soviet Union had spent years pretending wasn't there. Two world-class minds finally in the right rooms.
But it wasn't just the jobs that hit differently. It was everything. Eugenia walked into an American supermarket for the first time and saw rows and rows of food that didn't exist in Moscow. Choice that didn't exist in Moscow. The abundance the Soviet state had told her wasn't real, right there on the shelves in front of her.
Sergey said in an interview once, "From my parents, I learned to be happy without very many things. I still find myself not wanting to leave anything on the plate. I still look at prices."
Sergey Brin became a billionaire who shops at Costco and bought his parents a membership because Costco is built on one idea: buy in bulk, spend less, and waste nothing. For a family that survived 8 months with no income, that took a $2,000 loan to buy a used car, and that stood in a Moscow queue for basics that Americans threw away, Costco made complete sense.
At 15, Sergey Brin is already taking university-level courses at the University of Maryland while still in high school. By his junior year, there is nothing left for the school to teach him, so he enrolls full-time at the university.
He graduates from the University of Maryland at 19, honors in maths and computer science. A National Science Foundation graduate fellowship lands him at Stanford in September 1993.
And here is the fact that makes this entire thing feel like it was scripted. The year Sergey arrived at Stanford, which is 1993, it was the same year a young engineer from Chennai named Sundar Pichai arrived there on a scholarship. Two immigrants, same campus, same year, walking the same corridors and never once crossing paths. One would build Google, the other would one day run it. We have an episode on Sundar Pichai, do check it out.
But Google is not even an idea yet. Sergey Brin is just a new PhD student at Stanford, and while he's settling in, he is already building things.
At Stanford, Sergey Brin builds Small Things, a website where people can rate films, a tool that takes academic papers written in a coding language so dense that only scientists can read them and converts them into something anyone with a browser can open.
Small projects that nobody outside Stanford has heard of, but the same instinct running through all of them. Take information that is locked and make it available to everyone.
It's 1995, 2 years into his PhD. Sergey Brin is assigned to show a new arrival around Stanford's campus during orientation. The new arrival is 5 months older than Sergey, more experienced, already 22.
The new arrival's name is Larry Page.
And they disagree about almost everything from the moment they meet.
Brin described it to The Economist years later, half laughing. "We are both kind of obnoxious. Page remembered their first meeting exactly the same way.
Two people who would go on to build one of the most valuable companies in human history, and their first impression of each other was mutual annoyance.
Larry Page was working on a specific idea. In the academic world, when a respected scientific journal references another researcher's paper, it means that paper matters. The more journals cite you, the more important your work is considered. Larry's question was, could you apply that same logic to the internet? Every link to a web page was a vote of confidence. The more votes, the more important the page.
Brin was in data mining, the science of finding meaningful patterns inside massive chaotic data sets. Page's idea was brilliant in theory, but the internet had millions of pages, tracking every link between every page, calculating importance, ranking results in real time. That was a data problem nobody had solved yet. Brin looked at Page's idea and saw exactly what it needed.
Page had the question, Brin had the method. This is where Google's foundation was laid.
And so they got to work. What came out of that collaboration was initially called Backrub. The name came from what it did. It analyzed the links pointing back towards a web page from the rest of the internet.
Think of it like this. If 100 people are talking about a restaurant, recommending it, referencing it, that restaurant must be worth visiting. If nobody is talking about it, probably not. Backrub applied that same logic to every page on the internet. The more pages linking to you, the more important you must be.
Every search engine in 1995 ranked pages by how often a search word appeared in the text, which meant the game was to stuff your page with the right words. Spam was winning.
Backrub ranked by reputation instead of repetition. And suddenly, what came up first was actually what you were looking for. Stanford students noticed immediately. By 1996 and 97, they were using Backrub over every other search engine on the internet.
Page's dorm room was crammed with computers both had salvaged from other university departments, hardware that was being thrown away. The machine that would eventually answer billions of queries was built from other people's discarded scraps.
By early 1997, Backrub was handling 10,000 searches a day on Stanford's university network alone. It was consuming so much of Stanford's bandwidth that the IT department came knocking, and the infrastructure wasn't built for this. The dorm room wasn't built for this. Backrub had outgrown the university.
While they figured out what to do next, they wrote a paper. In April 1998, Brin and Page published The Anatomy of a Large-Scale Hypertextual Web Search Engine. In it, they laid out exactly how Backrub worked, how links could be used to rank pages by reputation, how their crawler indexed the web, and why every existing search engine was getting it wrong.
They presented it at the World Wide Web Conference. It became one of the most downloaded scientific documents in internet history.
And buried in the appendix of that paper, almost as a footnote, Brin and Page wrote something that would become one of the greatest ironies in the history of business.
They argued that advertising corrupts search. That the moment a search engine takes money from advertisers, it stops serving the user and starts serving the highest bidder.
2 years later, Google invented AdWords, the digital advertising system that would go on to generate hundreds of billions of dollars and fundamentally reshape how every business on earth reaches its customer. The same two people who wrote that advertising corrupts search built the advertising system that the entire internet now runs on.
And became two of the wealthiest people in human history doing it.
So they had built something extraordinary, and their first instinct was to sell it.
They went to Alta Vista first, the dominant search engine of the day. The offer licensed the algorithm for $1 million. Alta Vista's parent company, Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, passed. Alta Vista had been built to showcase DEC's hardware. Search was never really the point for them.
Then Excite. Brin and Page sat George Bell, Excite CEO, in front of two screens, one running Excite search engine, one running Backrub. They typed in one word, Internet.
Excite's results came back filled with Chinese web pages where the English word Internet appeared in the text. Backrub's results came back with pages that actually explained how to use a browser.
George Bell looked at those results and said no. His reason was that Backrub, soon to be named Google, was too good.
If users found what they were looking for immediately, they would leave Excite's site immediately. And Excite's entire advertising business depended on keeping people on the site as long as possible. A search engine that actually worked was a direct threat to how they made money.
Bell also wouldn't accept Page's condition that Excite replace all its existing search technology entirely with Google's. Vinod Khosla, one of Silicon Valley's most powerful venture capitalists, was on Excite's board at the time. He stepped in and negotiated the price down to $750,000. Bell still said no.
George Bell turned down Google twice. And years later, he was asked about it on CNBC. And he said, and I quote, "It's very easy to look back and say, should have, could have, would have. I think the decision we made at the time with what we knew was a good decision. It's laughable to say that now, I suppose."
The only person who gave them genuinely useful advice was Yahoo's co-founder David Filo. Yahoo also turned them down, same reason as everyone else. Better search meant users would leave the site faster and the whole business ran on keeping them there.
But Philo pulled Brin and Page aside and told them that what they had built was too unique to hand off to anybody else. He said, "Don't license it, build the company yourselves." And then he personally introduced them to Michael Moritz of Sequoia Capital.
By this point, the project needed a name. In 1997, Page and a group of fellow Stanford graduate students were gathered in an office brainstorming. A student named Sean Anderson suggested Googleplex, after the mathematical term Google, the number 1 followed by 100 zeros.
Page liked it, shortened it to Google. Anderson sat at his computer and searched to see if the domain was available, and he typed it wrong. He searched for google.com, not google.com. Page looked at the misspelling and decided he liked it even better. He registered google.com within hours.
September 15th, 1997, a Stanford professor named David Sheraton introduced Brin and Page to Andy Bechtolsheim, one of the original co-founders of Sun Microsystems, the same company that Vinod Khosla helped build in 1982 before moving on to become a Silicon Valley venture capitalist.
Brin and Page met Bechtolsheim at Sheraton's home. They showed Bechtolsheim the demo, walked him through the algorithm, how Google worked, why the results were better than anything else on the internet. Bechtolsheim was an engineer. He understood immediately what he was looking at. He had seen enough.
Now Bechtolsheim had another meeting. He needed to leave, but before he did, he pulled out his checkbook and wrote them a check of $100,000 made out to Google Inc.
But there was one problem. Google Inc. did not exist. The name existed, the company did not. No legal entity, no bank account, nowhere to deposit the $100,000. The check sat in a desk drawer for weeks while Brin and Page scrambled to legally create the entity the check was already addressed to.
September 7th, 1998, Google Inc. is incorporated. They finally deposit the check.
Now they needed an office. Enter Susan Wojcicki, a 30-year-old Intel marketing manager who had just bought a house in Menlo Park with her husband, and she could barely afford the mortgage. And they had a garage.
A mutual friend connected her to Page and Brin. She met them, listened to the idea. Her verdict: they seemed nice and the idea sounded kind of crazy, but the rent mattered more than the idea. $1,700 a month. She took a security deposit and told them, as long as you pay your rent on time, you can build your googly thing here.
This is what Google's first office actually looked like. A ping pong table doubling as a desk. Mismatched chairs. 4 people. The first employee they hired was a fellow Stanford student named Craig Silverstein, who would go on to become Google's first director of technology. He interviewed in that garage.
They had no revenue, no business model, no certainty that any of this would work. What they had was a search engine handling 10,000 queries a day, and the conviction that if they kept building, the world would eventually catch up.
Susan later became Google employee number 16. She eventually ran YouTube for a decade, and she is the older sister of Anne Wojcicki, the woman Sergey Brin would later marry.
In June 1999, Sequoia Capital and Kleiner Perkins jointly led a $25 million investment in Google. And here is where the story gets almost poetic. Kleiner Perkins, the firm that co-led that investment, was the same firm where Vinod Khosla was a general partner.
The man who had spent months trying to get Excite to buy Google for $750,000 ended up at the firm that invested $12.5 million in Google directly. The man who turned Google down handed them the introduction that changed everything. And the man who tried to sell them cheap ended up funding them. Silicon Valley is a very small place.
2001, Eric Schmidt joins as CEO. If you listen to our Sundar Pichai episodes, you will know him as the man who first spotted Pichai's potential at Google. He was the experienced operator brought in to run the business while Brin and Page focused on what they were actually good at.
August 19th, 2004, the IPO. Brin and Page refused to do it the standard way. Instead of handing control to investment banks, they ran a Dutch auction. Any investor, large or small, could bid. and the price would be whatever the market actually offered.
Wall Street hated it. The shares priced at $85 below projection. By the end of the first day, the stock was above $100. Google raised $1.67 billion. Day one valuation, $23 billion.
Google Inc. started with a check in a drawer, a typo in a domain search, a garage rented for $1,700 a month. $23 billion in 6 years. And today, over $2 trillion.
3 fun things about Google's founding.
1. The first server. In the garage, they built their server housing from Lego bricks, actual Lego, because it was cheap, modular, and stackable. The machine that would eventually answer billions of daily queries was assembled from children's toy blocks.
2. The first Google Doodle. Days before they officially incorporated, Larry and Sergey went to the Burning Man festival in Nevada. They needed an out-of-office message for the website. So they put a stick figure from the Burning Man emblem where the second O in the Google should be. The first ever Google Doodle was a "We are not at work, we are at festival" message.
3. The IPO share count. When Google filed for its IPO, it offered exactly 14,142,135 shares of Class A stock, the first 7 digits of the square root of 2.
Nerds. Absolute nerds. YouTube CEO Neil Mohan once described Stanford as nerd on nerd. Already a nerd? At Stanford, the dial gets turned up to 11.
Before Google could exist, the idea was rejected by 3 of the biggest companies. But the rejection did not kill the idea. It ended the negotiation and began the company.
Which brings us to this victory code. Every rejection is a map. When an entire industry rejects the same idea, there are 2 possibilities. Either the idea is bad, or it threatens every existing business model in the room. Get rejected enough times by enough serious people, and you start to know which one it is.
The rejection was not a dead end, it was a map. It showed them exactly where the gap was and exactly why no one else was going to fill it.
The code is not push through, the code is read between the no's. What is it actually telling you? Who is threatened and why? The sharper the rejection, the closer you are to something real.
The book that puts the sharpest framework around this code is The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. His argument? Established companies don't fail because they are poorly managed. They fail because they are well managed, rationally protecting existing business models from ideas that threaten them.
The rejection Brin and Page received was not a mistake. It was a structurally predictable response from rational incumbents. Once you understand that pattern, you will stop focusing on the rejection and focus on why.
After the IPO, the nerds in a garage era was officially over. Google wasn't just a search engine anymore. It was becoming the internet's central nervous system, and they were moving with a velocity that terrified the rest of the valley.
In 2006, they made a move that the media called a suicide mission. They bought YouTube for $1.65 billion. At the time, YouTube was barely 20 months old, hadn't made a single dollar in profit, and was drowning in copyright lawsuits.
But the DNA was a perfect match. YouTube was the work of 2 immigrants and a rebel, Steve Chen from Taiwan, Javed Karim from East Germany, and Chad Hurley, a design student from Pennsylvania who didn't care about the rules of traditional broadcasting.
Like Brin and Page, they believed that the broadcast shouldn't be a privilege of the elite. Brin and Page were betting that video would become the world's second search bar, and they were right. Today, YouTube generates over $30 billion in advertising revenue every year.
Then they turned their eyes to mobile phones. While everyone else was trying to build better flip phones, Google bought a tiny startup called Android in 2005 for about $50 million.
It was the ultimate Trojan horse play. By giving the software away for free to every phone manufacturer on earth, they ensured that no matter who built the hardware, Google owned the gateway to the web. Today, there are over 3 billion active Android devices.
The expansion hit a wall in 2006. That was the year Google launched a censored search engine in mainland China. For the first time, their universally accessible mission was compromised. They were playing by government's rules, filtering results and burying inconvenient history.
Brin was the internal dissenter from day one. To him, this wasn't just a market entry, it was a betrayal of the very reason he built Google.
The breaking point came in 2010. Chinese state hackers launched a sophisticated attack on Google's infrastructure, specifically targeting the Gmail accounts of human rights activists. For Brin, the ghost of the Soviet Union had just knocked on the door.
He pushed harder than anyone for the exit. He refused to let Google be the tool that helped a regime ration the truth. They pulled the plug on the Chinese engine and rerouted users to an uncensored server in Hong Kong. It cost them the largest market on earth, but Brin drew a line.
By 2015, the ambition finally outgrew the name. They restructured into Alphabet Inc., turning Google into a subsidiary to make room for the moonshots, the ideas that sounded as insane as a search engine did in 1998.
They built Waymo, a self-driving car that sees in every direction simultaneously and never gets tired, distracted, or drunk. They bought DeepMind, a lab in London with one mandate: build an AI that can solve problems that have stumped scientists for decades.
And Calico, a company with a single staggering mandate: to treat aging not as a fact of life, but as a bug in the human code that can be fixed.
Each project was given its own room, its own budget, and a mandate to fail fast or change the world.
And that brings us to the victory code that explains why Sergey Brin couldn't just be another CEO and why he was willing to walk away from the biggest market on earth.
Build the exact opposite of what broke you.
The Soviet state controlled information as an instrument of power. It decided what the truth was. It decided who was allowed to know what. And the boy who grew up inside that system built a machine that puts all of the world's information in your hand for free, with no authority standing between you and the answer.
Whatever system failed you, whatever was withheld, gate-kept, rationed, denied, that system has already handed you the blueprint for what the world needs built. You have to be willing to build it.
The book we would put out alongside this is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. It is a 2,000-year-old Stoic idea that the thing blocking your path is not separate from your path. It is the path. Ryan Holiday wrote the book. Sergey Brin lived it.
Well, Susan Wojcicki gave Google its first address. The woman who changed Sergey Brin's life next was her sister, Anne Wojcicki.
Anne Wojcicki grew up on Stanford's campus. Her father was a physics professor there. She played varsity ice hockey at Yale, graduated with a biology degree, spent years on Wall Street as a healthcare analyst, and the whole time she had one frustration. Genetic information that could change how people understood their own health was locked away inside research labs, inaccessible to the very people it concerned the most.
In 2006, Anne co-founded 23andMe, named for the 23 pairs of chromosomes in every human cell. The idea was, you send in a saliva sample in a small tube, the lab analyzes your DNA, and the results come back to you directly. Your ancestry, your genetic traits, your predispositions to certain diseases.
Susan introduced Anne to Sergey. They started dating.
They married in May 2007 in the Bahamas. Guests were flown in without being told the destination until they were already in the air. They were taken by boat to a sandbar off a secluded island. Brin wore a black swimsuit and wore white. They swam to the ceremony.
Their son was born in late 2008, their daughter in late 2011. Their children's last name is Wojin, a blend of both surnames. Together, they co-led the Brin-Wojcicki Foundation. In 2012 alone, they gave away $223 million, making them the fifth largest donors in the United States that year.
In 1998, the same year Google is incorporated, Sergey's mother Eugenia is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She was 50 years old. Her left leg had started to drag.
It took 2 years of appointments before doctors finally confirmed it, because she had none of the typical symptoms. No tremors, nothing easily identifiable.
She was not the first in the family. His aunt also had Parkinson.
10 years later, in 2008, Anne asked Brin to look something up in his 23andMe account, a mutation called G2019S on the LRRK2 gene, chromosome 12. One letter changed in your genetic code and your likelihood of developing Parkinson's disease rises dramatically.
The Brin family were among the first people to be tested through 23andMe. Eugenia herself donated a saliva sample.
Her results showed she had the G2019S mutation, not on one gene, on both, a rare double mutation, the single greatest genetic contributor to Parkinson's discovered to date.
And when Sergey looked up his own account, he had it too.
The average person's lifetime risk of developing Parkinson's, 1 to 2%. With this mutation, it goes up to 20 and 80%. Brin's own number for himself, the one he chose to use, 50-50.
September 2008, Sergey Brin disclosed the mutation and the risk in a public blog called 2. In it, he wrote, and this is a direct quote,
"When my wife asked me to look up G2019S in my raw data, I viewed it mostly as entertainment. But of course, I learned something very important to me. I now have the opportunity to adjust my life to reduce those odds. I also have the opportunity to perform and support research into this disease long before it may affect me.
He starts exercising aggressively. He drinks caffeine. He stops smoking. Every piece of evidence that science had on slowing Parkinson's, he built his life around it.
And then he starts funding research. The Michael J. Fox Foundation, the University of Maryland, ASAP, aligning science across Parkinson's. All of it targeting the exact genetic mutation he and his mother share.
Over $1 billion. One intended outcome. Don't get the disease.
His original estimated risk, 50-50. His revised estimate, factoring in what he had changed and what the research had achieved, somewhere under 10%. Still 10 times the average, but heading in the right direction.
Sergey Brin is the first person in recorded history to fund major scientific research into a disease based on a genetic test before showing a single symptom.
Eugenia herself did not sit still either. In her later years, she joined the Patient Council of the Michael J. Fox Foundation. She led the digitization of HIAS archive of Jewish immigrant records.
The same HIAS that met the Brin family in Vienna in 1979. In 2009, Sergey donated $1 million to HIAS, the organization that held his family's hand when they had nothing.
Eugenia Brin passed away on December 3rd, 2024. She was 76.
She once said, sitting at her dining table in California, of her son and what he had built. It's mind-boggling. It's hard to comprehend really. He was a very capable child in math and computers, but we could have never imagined this.
And that brings us to our next victory code. Your worst news is not your final word.
Sergey Brin found out he had a 50-50 chance of getting the same disease that was already taking his mother. He had two choices, fall apart or do something about it.
He chose to do something about it. He funded the research, he changed his lifestyle, he moved the number from 50-50 to under 10%. In 2012, Sergey Brin walked on stage at a Google's annual developer conference to unveil what he believed was his next great idea. He had been working on it for 2 years. Smart glasses. A computer on your face. Directions, messages, photos, all accessible through a tiny screen in your eye line without ever reaching for your phone.
To introduce it, he arranged for 4 Google employees to skydive out of a plane above San Francisco, live streaming their jump through the glasses. They landed on the roof of the conference venue. The crowd went wild. The glasses were called Google Glass. They were priced at $1,500.
The backlash began almost immediately.
The problem was the camera. A small lens mounted on the corner of the frame, always there, always potentially recording, completely invisible to anyone nearby. Bars banned them, restaurants banned them, movie theaters were put on alert by the Motion Picture Association. A Las Vegas strip club required patrons to check their glasses at the door.
The public gave glass wearers a name that stuck, glassholes. It became so widespread that Google published an official guide titled How Not to Be a Glasshole. One of the only times in corporate history a company has used a derogatory slur for its own customers in its own official communications.
And then in 2013, something became public that made everything worse. Brin had been in an affair with Amanda Rosenberg, the marketing manager for Google Glass, the woman running the public face of his most personal project.
Brin and Anne separated immediately. Rosenberg was moved to a different department. The momentum around Glass, already struggling, collapsed entirely. The product that had launched with skydivers and a standing ovation was now inseparable from the story of a broken marriage.
Anne said to the New York Times, "I was mad at Sergey for what he did."
Google Glass was discontinued for consumers in 2015, the same year the divorce from Anne was finalized.
The enterprise version limped on for years. It was finally discontinued in 2023. By then, the consumer version had become a case study in how spectacle can mask an unfinished product and how a personal implosion can accelerate a professional one.
In November 2018, Brin married Nicole Shanahan, a legal technology entrepreneur who had founded a patent intelligence company. They had a daughter later that year.
In December 2021, they separated. Brin filed for a divorce in January 2022. The Wall Street Journal reported that part of what came apart was a brief affair in 2021 between Shanahan and Elon Musk, at the time one of Brin's closest friends in Silicon Valley.
The journal reported that Brin confronted Musk directly. The friendship ended. Musk and Shanahan both disputed the characterization. The journal stood by its reporting.
The divorce was finalized in 2023. 2 marriages, 2 very public endings.
December 2019. Sergey Brin steps down as president of Alphabet. Larry Page steps down as CEO. Sundar Pichai had been running Google since 2015. In December 2019, he was made CEO of Alphabet as well.
Sergey Brin had a plan. He was going to try retirement and study physics in cafes. 1 month later, COVID-19 lockdown begins, the cafes close.
Sergey Brin called his retirement the worst decision ever. By his own account, he started to unravel. He described himself as spiraling, not being sharp. The technical work had been the structure of his entire adult life.
When Google began allowing small numbers of people back into the office, Brin just walked back in. He started showing up to Gemini AI meetings.
And then in November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT. And here is the kick. The architecture that powers ChatGPT, the transformer architecture, was invented by Google researchers.
Google published it in 2017 paper called Attention is All You Need. They shared it with the world and OpenAI ran with it.
Brin later admitted it publicly. We for sure messed up. We underinvested and didn't take it as seriously as we should have. Google, the company that invented the technology, was caught flat-footed by a competitor using their own discovery.
That is when Brin came all the way back. By 2023, he was in the office 3 to 4 days a week, working directly with the Gemini researchers, making hiring decisions, holding weekly discussions with the engineering teams.
In Feb 2025, an internal memo he had written to the Gemini and DeepMind teams leaked to the New York Times. The paper published the contents. Within hours, it was everywhere. In it, he said 60 hours a week is the sweet spot of productivity.
He recommended staff be in the office every weekday. He said employees putting in the bare minimum were not only unproductive, but also highly demoralizing to everyone else. And he said Google's AI products were overrun by filters, that the company needed to stop building nanny products and start trusting its users more.
The memo was not a mandate, but it landed like one. The criticism was swift. Here was a man worth over $100 billion who retired voluntarily at 46 and came back because he found retirement boring, telling engineers to work 60 hours a week.
The disconnect was hard to miss, and the nanny product line alarmed people outside the company too, because it sounded like Brin was pushing Google to strip safety guardrails from its AI in order to move faster than the competition.
But Brin stood by every word.
He said later that coming back was some of the most fun he had had in his life, that staying retired would have been a big mistake.
Since 2015, Brin has been personally funding a company called LTA Research and Exploration, lighter than air, based at Moffett Federal Airfield, a few minutes from the Googleplex. He has put an estimated $250 million into it.
LTA is building what is currently the world's largest aircraft, a helium-lift, electrically powered airship called Pathfinder 1. 407 feet long, nearly twice the length of a Boeing 747.
Built from carbon fiber tubes and titanium hubs, lifted by 13 bags of helium, powered by 12 electric motors. The goal: disaster relief deliveries to places with no roads or airports, eco-friendly cargo. The largest aircraft to take to the skies since the Hindenburg in the 1930s.
The man whose parents left Moscow with almost nothing is now building the world's largest flying vehicle, an airfield built in 1931 as a home for the US Navy's own giant airships. The same hangar that once sheltered Navy airships during World War II now shelters his.
The Refugee has the biggest airship on the lot.
January 2017. An executive order bans travel into the United States from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Refugees suspended, visas revoked mid-air.
People already on planes turned away at the gate. Protests erupt at airports across the country within hours. 2 days later, January 29th, Sergey Brin gets in his car and drives to San Francisco International Airport. And there, he stands in the arrivals hall with the protesters.
He is worth over $40 billion. He runs one of the most powerful companies on earth. He could have posted something. He could have written a check. Instead, he drove to an airport alone in casual clothes, no security detail, no PR person.
Reporters spot him in the crowd. They ask why he's there.
Brin looks at them and says, and this is a direct quote reported by Forbes journalist Ryan Mack on January 29, 2017. I'm here because I am a refugee.
In 2002, MIT Technology Review named him one of the top 100 innovators in the world under 35. In 2004, he was inducted into the National Academy of Engineering. The Marconi Prize, given to those who advance communications for the benefit of all humanity, went to Brin and Page that same year.
He donated $57 million to the University of Maryland, the university where his father became a professor, the university where Eugenia received treatment for Parkinson's, the university where Sergey himself graduated at 19.
And Google itself, the free search bar that 2 billion people type into every day. That is the largest single act of giving back in this entire story. Built free, kept free.
If today's episode changed how you see what is possible, share it with one person who needs to hear it.
And if you're not subscribed, now is the time. Every episode of The Victory Code takes one extraordinary immigrant life, goes all the way back to the beginning, and hands you the specific mindset and hard-won strategies you can actually use.
Not inspiration, systems. Not motivation, codes.
I'm Harsh.
And I'm Vaishali, and this is the Victory Code Podcast.